What's up, everyone? Happy Saturday. Hope you guys are doing well. For everyone who's a part of my fantasy football league over on the Patreon community, hope you guys are studying up, looking at those injury lists, because you need to update your lineup for tomorrow. Clearly, I'm not obsessed with fantasy football at all. You guys don't want to hear about that. You guys want to meet my guest today, because my guest is super cool in general. I've known him for a very long time. He's a good friend. He does what I do for CinemaBlend, and he's so freaking good at his job. But on top of that, he's been working on this book, and I have a feeling a lot of you guys out there want to hear about this book. So let's bring in Sean O'Connell.
I want to talk fantasy. Can we do fantasy?
Are you into fantasy football?
Well, yeah, but my team, so I auto-drafted this year because the night that they were drafting, I couldn't be around for it. And I ended up with Michael Thomas and George Kittle as my tight end. And then I had Brady and Aaron Rodgers, which I was pretty comfortable with. And of course, Michael Thomas and Greg Kittle both go out in the first week. And so now I'm just decimated.
I have Kittle and McCaffrey in one of my leagues.
McCaffrey's out for weeks
in that league, so I'm still holding on. But it's good to know you're into fantasy football. We were like desperately looking for people to fill. We're in like a little movie critics league, and we were desperately looking for people to fill spots. And now I'm pissed at myself that I didn't think of you.
That's okay. I've been in one league for a long, long time, and I don't want to take on too many because it really ruins my Sunday. It honestly,
I understand that.
Yeah, I get physically upset from games that I have no control over.
It's not a keeper league, right?
No, it's an auction league, which I hate too. Yeah, so you get $200 on draft day, and you spend X amount of money on certain players. So you could go all in like $80 on Christian McCaffrey, but then you only have 120 to fill the rest of your roster.
Well, I hope no one did that this year.
Terrible. It's terrible. Not fun.
We already have a super chat, and this is from my resident fantasy football guru in my Patreon community. This is Caleb right here. We wouldn't have started that league if it were not for Caleb. So Caleb, thank you for being here. So Sean, I want to ask you about a lot of things right now, but one of my favorite things to ask about during like my movie interviews has been how someone got into the industry to begin with. And in doing these streams, it's making me realize that while I always know what my friends are up to right now, like I don't really know a lot about how any of them actually wound up in this crazy industry.
Great question.
So where did all of this begin for you? Because like I know you do some stuff for like actual legit broadcast news. So was that first, or was the CinemaBlend sphere first?
Yeah. So Perri and I have a connection because we're both from the New York, Long Island area. And so growing up on Long Island, there was a video store place in our town that I just frequented all the time. And I was a story junkie and didn't realize how much of a film junkie I was until that was just the medium that I chose to sort of pursue all the time. So I've been a movie fan, like a fanatic, my entire life. But I didn't realize the whole time I was like building up a background of information and knowledge that you could put to something else. So I went to college, I studied communications courses, was perked by a film studies class where a teacher talked about the analyzation of film and all the different genres. That really opened me up. And it was someone who I was working with in one of my jobs right out of college who said to me, you know, you really should write about movies. Why don't you write about movies? Like there's film journalists out there. This seems like something you should do. And that was the light bulb moment that went off. And I was like, oh, I really should do that. So I went to my career services office at my college and I was like, I would like to write about movies. And they were like, that's awesome. When you figure out how to do that, can you come back and tell us? Because they had no way of helping me. But right around that time, this was like 97, 98, the web was coming on and websites needed content. They just needed people to come on and fill their pages, essentially. So I got involved with a website called Eclipse Magazine. I partitioned that into a gig at USA Today. I went to City Search and I went to a print newspaper here in North Carolina for a while. But I always kept a foot in the internet side of it because that was always the direction where I thought things were going to go. I was on a website called filmcritic.com for a long time. And then that just led to, you build up clips, you build up contacts, and you just keep hopefully failing forward sort of deal. And that allowed me to end up at places like Fandango. I landed at CinemaBlend. I always liked the way CinemaBlend sort of operated with their freelancers and the way that they coached people along to sort of write the stuff that they wanted to write. And then I've been at CinemaBlend for going on about eight years now at this point. So it's just been steady. It's been very steady.
We didn't have any CinemaBlend crossover, did we? Well,
we did not. You were there before me.
Okay. Yeah. But what you said about them was exactly what I love so much. And I had the pleasure of getting to work with Katie Rich over there. And she was just probably one of the best editors I've ever had, and just always kind of, like encouraged me. I feel like I was very sensitive when I was first starting out. So having, criticism backed with genuine positivity and encouragement was very important. And she definitely did that for me.
There was an opportunity where I was given a chance to sort of leave CinemaBlend and go work full time for someplace. And I legitimately didn't want to leave there. Like, I didn't want to close off that valve. And you know that this industry is a lot about keeping your contacts open because you never know where you're going to end up. Mm-hmm. But I always wanted to stay working with those guys for exactly the reasons that you mentioned. And I mean, it's no surprise that Katie's gone on to Vanity Fair, and she's so incredibly talented. So, yeah, I mean, I'm really proud of what we've been able to build up there. I know it's a competitive field. But yeah, I listen, we're all trying to sort of take bites out of the same giant apple, and we all approach it different ways. So that's the skill, I think, is finding people with really fresh voices who can talk about the same subjects, but in different ways.
So I feel like even though we're all trying to do it our own different way, you and I cross over a little, because I know you really love the interview element of the job, and you're really freaking good at it.
Oh,
so
thank you.
I've got to ask, what is your favorite part of the job? Is it the interviews, or is it another part of it? I
do a podcast now called Real Blend that I do with two of my really close friends, Jake Hamilton and Kevin McCarthy. And they also do the junket circuit part of it. And I can honestly tell you now, I have more fun preparing for an interview with those two guys than I do doing it individually. Because for whatever reason, we all approach the subject matter, whoever the person is that we're speaking to, from three totally different perspectives. So whenever we get together to prep our questions, they flow in a way that's so entertaining to me to watch, because you would always be so defensive about, like, how are my questions going to go? Are they going to flow a certain way? That if you tried to collaborate with somebody else, it would be really difficult. And it's not the case when I'm working with those two guys at all. And so it's a joy when we have 20 minutes to talk to a filmmaker who we really love, because I genuinely want to know the answers to the questions that those guys usually bring up too. And so sometimes I just feel like a spectator. And so, yeah, I love that aspect. Having more time, obviously, with with people that we love, filmmakers, producers, screenwriters, even actors sometimes. That's been a real thrill. Although I don't like prepping for an individual interview. It's so much work. You don't know how it's going to go. Like if the person's not in a mood, I feel like we spend a lot of time prepping for interviews that we have no control over how they're going to go.
It's also, when you think about it, sometimes we spend a whole lot of time prepping for an interview that only amounts to 4 minutes of camera time.
It's very frustrating. Yeah.
Have you found, though, that being in lockdown and transitioning the junket game to Zoom has given you the opportunity to have more time with talent, though?
Yeah, to a certain extent. And it's not as exhausting. I think I said this the other day when we were sitting in a Zoom hospitality suite it's kind of delightful not to have to run to the airport after this is done. When you're in LA, that's not a big deal, right? Because you just get to go back home wherever you're at.
I forgot about that part of it for you.
Yeah, more often than not, we're trying to wrap up these rooms that we're trying to get through and then sprint to the airport and deal with the back half of travel, which is a horrific pain in the neck. So now I get to finish and then go downstairs and have dinner with the family. And that's kind of nice. But at the same time, the Zoom, I hope, is never going to replace that face-to-face, because I just feel like you have a better chance. It's really hard to make a connection in a junket setting anyway, because of the limited time that you have.
Yeah.
But I really do think that getting face-to-face and getting a chance to break through with a really good question or a great follow-up that's hampered by technology.
I will agree with that. I feel like right now my prediction is one thing, but I feel like since all of this has begun, if you ask me what the future of our end of the industry is, I would have had a different answer every stage of the way. But I feel like some talent is, Dewey almost just fell off my lap. Some talent is not gonna go back to face for a variety of reasons, whether it's because they're at risk, they realize it's not necessary for them to go out there and do that, and then some are gonna go back to it, but it's gonna take a really long time.
I found one of the hardest things too about it is that from a studio or junket perspective, they can't wrangle talent the way that they can if they're in a hotel room. Like when the talent is at home, they can just disappear for a couple of minutes.
Yeah.
And it really delays the junket day. This is really inside baseball. I don't know if anyone cares about this.
There's that, and there's time zones, because I've come to learn in the past couple of weeks that I'm not the only one who like ran off back home to family. Like I've interviewed people who are based in Australia right now, and the timing of those interviews are like all over the place.
Sure. Yeah. Or just even UK to California time is really hard.
That's been a little bit of a challenge, but we're making it work and we're rolling with it right now.
The part I don't get are people who say they don't have the time, because all we're doing is sitting around here, like whenever they're like, I'm super busy, I don't have the time to do it. I'm always like, come on now, just hop on your computer for 20 minutes.
Yeah. I mean, I kind of don't get that either. I don't know what people are actually up to. And I guess some people are going back to work too. There's certain productions that are back underway. But the only time I can use the I don't have time excuse is like one of the silver linings to all of this for me. You know how much I love interviews.
Yeah.
Is that is pretty much all I do now is like conduct the interview and then make the most of the content I get from the interview. And I don't want to have it any other way, but it breaks my heart that I've hit the point from week to week where I have to be like, sorry, have to pass on this one because I just don't have time.
Yeah, it's time consuming after the fact. Turning that, like doing the interview is fine, but getting it ready for everybody else to watch is a whole nother thing.
And like building the articles and all that, I feel like nobody realizes how much time that actually takes.
I hate that all this is distracting from your own creativity, though, because you have so many other things that you can do. You're a really gifted writer. You make films. Like, I want to see you get into that.
That itch has come back a little.
Good.
Have you seen Host on Shudder?
Yes, it's great.
Everyone here knows I talk about it all the time. I'm obsessed with it. But the creativity that went into something like that really piques my interest and my sensibilities as a storyteller. Yeah. So if anything did that to me during lockdown, it is that film.
I went into it thinking that was just going to be such a gimmick. And it was so effective. It was so effective. I'm so happy that director scored that deal with Blumhouse, because I feel like if he did that with such limited resources, we are in for some really special stuff when he has a legit studio like Blumhouse at his back. Totally agree.
Look who's in the house today. Ed Douglas is here.
Hey.
For Sean, ask Sean if we have to write a book to get one of those cool t-shirts.
Oh, well, it doesn't hurt for sure. But this is available on a website called Ink to the People. And they do a lot of stuff for charity. Zach uses it to launch fundraising campaigns for different shirts that he designs. And all of the proceeds go to the AFSP. So one part of the reason why I got so intrigued by the Snyder Cut members and the movement that they were pushing was that although they were doing a ton of work to raise awareness for Zach's cut of the movie and whether it should get released or whether it even existed or not, whenever they did a marketing event, they would always have a fundraising component that went to AFSP because for people who don't know this, the reason why Zach left Justice League in 2017 is because his daughter died by suicide. So they always wanted to have this charitable element to raise money for AFSP. And so some of the t-shirts that he's designed, one of them in particular, raised over $86,000 in donations for it. This one was one of the more recent ones. And it's cool. I like that there's sweatshirts available for it. It's got the logo for all the members of the leagues on the t-shirts and stuff like that. I think he wants to call the Snyder Cut Zack Snyder's Justice League, but there's speculation behind the scenes that there's all sorts of legal reasons why he might not be able to call it that, and then it might be called Justice League the Director's Cut, or it's weird. Everybody calls it the Snyder Cut, but it's just I don't know what they're going to be able to call it when it finally does come to HBO Max.
Yeah, no, I get that. There's so much fine print stuff that we don't really know about, and stuff that was solidified earlier on that then can't be changed after the fact. I understand that kind of confusion. So talking a little bit about like the book and maybe even just like, when did you realize that you weren't just a fan of Justice League, Zack Snyder's work, but like you had a real passion for the release of the Snyder Cut?
Yeah, yes and no, which is what I think is pretty interesting about this. I came into this story with an interesting or a take on it, in that I found it as a fascinating story of something that we would cover just as film journalists. It's a massive property in the DC world. It's their Justice League movie for the first time ever, seeing all these. But I'm more of a, you can see over my shoulder, I'm a Marvel kid. I've always been a Marvel kid. So I'm more fascinated, I was, in the MCU and the different things that they were trying to do. So I always saw DC as trying to sort of replicate that with the way that they were rushing through Man of Steel and Batman versus Superman, that they were chasing after what Marvel Studios essentially had. The reason why I got intrigued by it is because anyone who saw the theatrical cut of Justice League had to realize that a lot of stuff went wrong behind the scenes, right? Like, and were we ever going to know what that felt like? The thing that picture interest when you see that is what went wrong here? Like, who allowed this to happen, kind of thing. But it wasn't as a full blown fan necessarily. It was more just the curiosity of as a journalist. So then it kind of went off my radar for a while. And from 2017 to about 2018, these members were fighting so hard to raise awareness. And you would see the hashtag Release the Snyder Cut all over social media. And, most of the time it was very, very serious. A lot of people used it for a punchline kind of thing. It came to mean like, show me the version of whatever that I don't, this movie that I didn't like, release the fill in the blank cut. And then in San Diego of 2019, the group did something called Project Comic-Con, where, if you remember being in San Diego, they took over bus stops and they wrapped them with these posters talking about the 3.5-hour version of Zack Snyder's Justice League. They had billboards and posters downtown. They handed out t-shirts. And that's when I was like, who are these people? Like, what are they doing that they've literally pushed all this stuff forward? And then a few months after that, this is when it really hooked. A few months after that, at New York Comic-Con, they rented a Times Square billboard. And it was for the duration of the Saturday for New York Comic-Con. And it was all of these quotes from Zack Snyder and Ray Fisher and all these people talking about Release the Snyder Cut. And I just thought, this is unbelievable. Like, I need to know who these people are, that they are this organized of a fandom and that they're this passionate about it. So I started asking around. And as I got more information from them and the reasons why they did it, you start to think like, oh, I wonder if there's more to this or enough to this to write a book. And I'll tell you, so around August of last year, I started to have the idea of like, okay, I think there might be a book here. And I talked to a few friends of mine who had written books, and they told me about how to put a proposal together. And I started to map out, like, start to think about it. You start to see it as chapters. Oh, I would want to touch on this. I'd want to touch on this. You start to build it together, and then you ship it around to a lot of different people to see if they would want to publish it. And the feedback I got back, more than anybody else, you get a ton of rejections. People who are just like, oh, this isn't what I'm looking for, which is fine. I kind of embrace for that. But the response I got back more from anybody was, this feels like a really great magazine cover. Like, I don't know if there's enough here, but for a book kind of thing. And I was like, I thought those people were being a little bit short-sighted. I thought the story was big enough. But it was one thing that Michelle said to me, that my wife said to me, when I was explaining to her, like, you don't understand, like, this guy was directing a movie, and then he left it, and they handed it over to the guy who was like the biggest director from their rivals. Like, Joss Whedon came over and fixed it. And I was like, that makes sense, but it doesn't make sense, because like, he's done Avengers movies, but Joss would never finish a Zack Snyder movie. Their voices are totally different. And I was trying to explain all the business side of it. And Michelle was like, yeah, I know why that's interesting to you, but I don't care about any of that stuff. Like, that's really industry heavy. She goes, I want to know about the people who are doing it. Like, why are they doing it? Why are these fans dedicating themselves every single day to it? And I was like, yeah, I don't know the answer to that. And so I started asking them. I literally started asking them, like, why are you guys doing this so much? And their stories that came back were so intriguing to me that I was like, oh, there's the hook that I kind of need to push this forward. So that's kind of what the project became.
I love that. I want to backtrack just a little bit, because you were saying that as all this was going on with Justice League, you were just curious about it from a journalistic perspective.
Yeah.
Like, is that true for you with a whole bunch of other, like, big properties that don't pan out? Like, did you find that same part of your brain kind of like sparking when we were getting something like Josh Trank's Fantastic Four?
Not nearly as much. This one seemed really big to me because I tried to put it from the perspective of, if I was looking forward to Avengers Infinity War and something had botched that along the way, and that when it arrived, it was the travesty that the theatrical cut of Justice League is. How upset would I be? Like when I watched Justice League, I was like, this is a horrible film, but it didn't bother me in that way. But like so now the analogy that I kind of think of like is, let's say the Russos had started on Infinity War, but before they could deliver Endgame, they passed the baton to somebody else, for reasons that they couldn't control, and someone else delivered Endgame, and fans were expecting the completion of their vision, but they got something totally different. That allowed me to really buy in as a fan base and say like, okay, I get why you guys are super upset. You were looking forward to this Justice League movie more than anything else. But there's a lot of other movements that spring up. Right now, we've been doing a couple articles on CinemaBlend about the Alita folks who want to see the sequel.
That is another very, very vocal community.
Super passionate, right? And who would have thought that there would be that many people bought into seeing the next continuation of that? I think that going to Comic-Con as regularly as we were able to, and reminding yourself how passionate fans can be about very specific things, that to us, we treat them on a day-to-day basis as stuff that we're just writing about and covering, that it's nice to stop and step back from it a little bit and realize how important that stuff is to other people, to fans who literally that's their escape a lot of times from whatever job that they're doing, and they really do invest. They look forward to seeing something like a Justice League movie, seeing the characters that they've loved all these years come to fruition. And if a director is driving forward with a vision and you've bought into that vision and then it changes, of course you'd be super curious. Now, one thing that kept feeding it along the way, though, is that Zach fed it the whole time too. If he at any point over this past 3 years had said to his fans, like, guys, whatever you're fighting for, like, I don't have it, like, it's very sweet of you and I appreciate it, but there's no Snyder Cut. But instead he would do the exact opposite, and he would just keep sharing scenes from it, and stills, and encourage the movement. So I think it's a weird perfect storm of elements that happened that made this be much bigger than I ever thought it was going to be.
I feel like what you were just describing also is one of the reasons. So to bring in another franchise, I love Star Wars: The Last Jedi. And for a good while, I had a very difficult time understanding why there were so many people that were so against what happened to that movie in that movie. And the thing that wound up clicking for me is just the intense love you could really have for a character, and then seeing a character like Luke Skywalker ripped away from you, even if I viewed that story beat as something that was justified and well earned and a solid send-off for that character. It's a different type of pain to lose someone, even if it is a fictional movie character who is so important to you. And that was the moment where I'm like, I get it. I still love the movie, but I get it.
Now, how do you feel about Rise of Skywalker? I don't think we've ever talked about this.
I thoroughly enjoy watching that movie. And I know this isn't the most sound excuse ever, but the Star Wars film franchise is something that I just enjoy existing in. And I also think that certain sequences, standalone sequences in Rise of Skywalker are pretty well executed and entertaining. But when I take a step back and I look at the big picture, and I look at the big picture as it fits into the even bigger picture of this trilogy, I can 100% recognize the flaws, but that still hasn't taken away from the fact that I enjoy watching that movie. For
sure. And yeah, to me, like, the thing that intrigues me the most about that trilogy is that it didn't seem to have an overall plan, that they literally just passed it from talented filmmaker to talented filmmaker and didn't shepherd in again, not to keep going back to Kevin Feige, but Kevin Feige keeps a grip kind of on where the story is going, and he lets people be creative within it, but still sort of maintains like, here's where we're going with it. And I don't feel like Star Wars did that. So that aspect of that story fascinates me.
That confuses me more than anything. It's just with such a pricey, pivotal property for a major brand that they're funneling. I mean, it's not even just movie budgets. It's like so much of like the theme park industry involves the success of the Star Wars film franchise too. Like, how do you do all of that and not have a plan? I still can't understand that.
Well, and to tie to Justice League for one thing, like, I understand completely, looking at it from a big picture point of view, that what happened was Man of Steel did whatever it did box office wise. BVS was supposed to be Batman and Superman and Wonder Woman together for the first time on screen. you would assume that would be over $1 billion in box office immediately. Doesn't matter whether the movie's good or bad. And the minute that it didn't get there, the studio, in my opinion, panicked and thought, well, we have to pivot away from Zach's vision. We have to go in more in the audience friendly. Like Marvel's crushing it over here. You know, Marvel put out Iron Man 3, like a third Iron Man, and it went past $1 billion. And we can't get BVS to go past $1 billion. So whatever movie was going to be in that moment when they pivoted was going to get affected. Mm-hmm. It just happened to be their Justice League movie. And again, you know, people want to crap all over Joss. I think Joss got put into a horrible situation also. Like, he had X amount of time to reshoot an entire movie. I wish that they just pushed the date back and gave him a chance to redo a Justice League movie from his vision, and it didn't happen that way, and so they're constantly paying the price for that.
Yeah, the pressure involved in a situation like that is something that, I mean, I can't even imagine.
Right.
And everybody on that set was probably feeling it.
Imagine showing, like, now Zach has recruited all of those actors. That's his ensemble, you know?
Yeah.
And this new director has to come in and sort of reshape that. I don't envy that position at all.
Neither do I, not one bit. So another beginning question for you. So you were saying earlier that, you know, a lot of this is very inside baseball, and either you're into Release the Snyder Cut or maybe you're not. And if you're not really in that world, you don't fully understand it. So what was it like for you figuring out how to pitch the book to a publisher who didn't really understand movie fandom?
Yeah, that's a really great question. Because when I started pitching it around to everybody, there wasn't all this hype around the Snyder Cut now coming. It's getting a ton of headlines now because of the fact. And I'll tell you, I've heard from a few publishers who have come back around after rejecting it and asking, like, hey, is that still available? And that's pretty rewarding.
That's the best feeling ever.
It's great. It's really great. But I think that they just had, I tied it into the fact that superhero movies right now are almost like money printing machines. You know, if you do a good version of one, you're going to get rewarded. Like, look at I sort of hyped up the fact that, like, Black Panther is contending for Oscars at this stage. Endgame is now the highest grossing movie of all time. It's clear to almost anybody who's paying attention to the industry that superhero movies are huge. Mm-hmm. And I was like, but here's one that should have been a home run and was tinkered with so badly that it failed, you know? And I want to tell you the story about why it failed, which to me seems pretty interesting anyway, regardless where you're coming from. But in addition, I want to tell you about these fans who have spent the past 3 years dedicating their personal time and effort into getting that original version back. And then not only did they do that, but over the course of time, they have raised all this money for suicide prevention. At this point now, they've crossed $200,000 that they've raised for the AFSP over the course of their time. But it was also just, once you started to single out the different stories in terms of, they rented a plane to fly over the Warner Brothers studio lot in Burbank. They rented the Times Square billboard. They got Subway to donate money for Feed America because of the Ben Affleck campaign. And now Subway's on board with their Release the Snyder Cut. Like, all these little things to me were interesting, bizarre stories as part of the movement. And then when you got into the stuff that happened behind the scenes, like, I have an entire chapter that's all just about Henry Cavill's mustache, because, like, that alone is such a bizarre story that I was like, that had to be told. And then you get into the stuff with Autumn Snyder too, and the tragedy that happened there. Like, there's really compelling angles no matter where you're coming from. So I'm glad that the publishers that we're going with, I'm with Applause Books, they're part of Rowan and Littlefield, that they at least understood that, like, oh yeah, there's a really interesting story here to tell. The hardest part about it, Perri, honestly, was that if I do another book, and I would like to do another book, I don't want it to have a breaking news element to it. This felt like I was racing against the clock, especially when Zach dropped the news that it's coming. You know, like, when I wrote it at the time, I put something in the book that I was like, this could be like a Superman 2 Richard Donner type situation where it takes 20 something years to get to the point where the Donner cut gets released. But then it turned out to not be the case. And they announced that it's coming in a few months. And it was a great ending, but it really meant having to go back in and rework a book quickly.
So, I mean, the breaking news thing isn't even just, for that one specific moment. It's still going on. Yeah. So how are you handling some of the other breaking news that we're experiencing right now?
Well, the book wasn't meant to touch fully on that anyway, because that became the hardest element to get people to talk about, the changing of power. Like people who are fiercely loyal to Zach didn't want to discuss it at all. Nobody from Joss's camp wanted to touch it at all. Here's something that you will understand. We had very close contacts at Warner Brothers. And the very first time that I started even pitching this idea of a book, I had to go right to them. They were the first people I went to. And I had to say, hey guys, I'm writing a book. And they were like, that's great. What's it going to be? And I was like, it's about the Snyder Cut. And they were like, good luck. They were literally saying, they literally said, that's great. We think that's fantastic. We can't help you at all in any way, shape, or form. We can't help you get interviews. We can't fill in any gaps. So all of that had to be stuff that I could report along the entire way. Now, the good news was we'd been writing about it from the entire time at CinemaBlend. So I had all these years of reporting. I went to the Justice League set in 2016 when it was still Zach's movie. Right around the time that I was really debating, should I do this book? Should I actually commit and dive into this? I swear to God, this is a part of the book, a little part of the intro. I got an invitation. I took vacation days at CinemaBlend.
Yes.
Did you read this? Did I send you this?
I wasn't sure if you wanted me to tell anybody.
You can say you read it.
Let me tell you, your book got me through the boring parts of my physical therapy sessions this week.
Mission accomplished.
Thank you.
So for people who are listening, I took vacation days at CinemaBlend, and I was going to dedicate my time to putting the proposal together and writing a sample chapter. And I ended up getting an invitation to go to a set visit on the days that I took vacation. And it was to go to Zack Snyder's Army of the Dead set visit in Atlantic City. And I honestly just laughed because I was like, that's the universe sending you a sign.
Yeah.
How he hasn't done a movie since Justice League. This is his first movie since. And I'm sitting there thinking about it. And then the invitation comes in, and I was like, that's hilarious.
I'm a big believer in signs like that. So when I totally could feel you.
Good. I'm glad. So that was huge.
There was another question that someone dropped in. J. Scott for real had it. I feel like I lost it. I'm so bad with.
I just saw Ed Douglas. Thank you, Ed. I appreciate it. He just pre-ordered this book.
This is what we were talking about a little bit before. So J. Scott for real said, never really understood why Joss took the job on. Seemed like a lose-lose scenario. Must have thrown a lot of effing money at him.
Yeah.
Do you have any idea why Joss might have wanted to jump into something that was seemingly impossible?
To this day, I still don't understand it. And I can tell you that my opinion when he got hired, the first thing I thought was that there's no way that he must have at least looked at the footage that they had and thought oh yeah, I can work with this. There's enough here that I can sort of fix, because they did have a footage screening where they showed it to Joss, the screenwriter for Wonder Woman, and the screenwriter for the NWA biopic, and I'm blanking on their names right now. So those three people went and met with Warner Brothers and watched the footage, and then I don't know what happened after that, but shortly after, Joss got hired in order to do the gig. And in fact, Joss was hired before Zach left. He got hired by Jeff Johns and John Berg, the two producers on the movie, to just punch up the jokes, to punch up the humor a little bit, because they wanted to make it lighter. And I talk about this too, with the set, when we went to go visit the set, Zach had always said the tone was going to be lighter. It was meant to be lighter. It was going to be a transition away from BVS, which was supposed to be these two guys against each other. But the addition of characters like Ezra Miller's Flash and Jason Momoa's Aquaman was going to bring levity regardless. Now, not Ant-Man and the Wasp type thing, joke a minute, but still lighter than what you got in BVS. But then when Zach had to leave because of his daughter's suicide, Joss was there, and they essentially just thought well, here's a guy who did 2 Avengers movies. Let's have him do it. I'm more surprised that Joss has never come out to just tell his side. You would think that he would want to, especially now as the name is getting dragged in the mud, just do a exclusive interview someplace where he's just hey, here's what happened to me.
It's very surprising. I mean, I feel like this decision from the studio's perspective isn't surprising because, like I'm also thinking back to the Han Solo movie.
Yeah.
It's like if you run into a situation where you're not thrilled with what you're getting, then you hand it over to someone who has a really great reputation of delivering films like Ron Howard.
Sure.
Ross can do that. So I understand why they chose him, but I want to know a little bit more about what was really driving his decision. And especially now with everything that's coming out, how hasn't, like, even if it's not on a very like press friendly, business friendly level, how isn't the personal itch to tell your side not kind of bubbling over that you have to come out with it?
So I can say, and maybe you guys over Collider are getting this as well too, we're getting emails suddenly from Joss's reps who are clarifying certain things in certain stories, which is the first time this has happened in 3 years. We haven't heard anything from them at all. And now they're starting to come forward and at least say, hey, can you just clarify this aspect of the story? And it's not anything significant that you would think. So I reply back with, of course, happy to help you with this. But hey, by the way, if Joss would like to talk, this would be a really good opportunity for him to come forward and start to let his, but there's an internal investigation going on now at Warner Brothers that's being conducted by Warner Media, which is the bigger group. And maybe they're waiting to see what the results of that are going to be.
Yeah. And like, who knows what the legal restrictions of something like that being ongoing cause, maybe he just isn't able to speak from a legal perspective right now. So right. I don't know.
There's always the component too, and I find this really fascinating, that we wouldn't be here if the 2017 Justice League theatrical cut worked. If he took it over and delivered a decent movie, not great, but decent, I think people would have been like, okay, that was good enough. I understand what happened. It sucks. Zach had to leave. Joss did the best he could, but it was so bad. It was such a middle finger to what they were trying to do. And like right out the gate with the bad Henry Cavill face, you watch that and you think like, who looked at that and said like, this is good enough. Just let it go.
There's a lot of things like that are major head scratchers.
Yeah.
So how are you feeling about where that film franchise is right now? Is there any single part of it that, I don't know, like gives you the most hope for the future, that you are most excited to see how it's turning out from here?
Yeah, 100%. I think that they've gotten themselves to a point where they can now move forward productively. And that's by embracing the concept of Elseworlds and the multiverse, which allows Matt Reeves to go do a disconnected Batman story, and that can be as different from anything else as you want to do. I think and hope that Snyder gets to continue as long as he would like to on HBO Max, and it's its own little Snyderverse, and it doesn't affect the DCEU proper, which I understand that would be very difficult from the actors and their contracts and how much longer does he actually want to do this. I think that that's a component, but I know HBO Max desperately needs content. All these streaming services need content.
Oh, yes.
Why wouldn't they invest in something like the DC stories and their labels? You hear about John Cena going over there to do a Peacemaker show. Ben had a really good Batman script that he would like to do somewhere. And if he has the freedom to do it as a 3-part episode on an HBO Max series, maybe. I did a video just this week on CinemaBlend where I kind of thought that the reshoots, or I'm sorry, the additional photography, if you call them reshoots, the Snyderverse just gets up and on. Well, I just think they're the same. They're kind of the same thing, but they're not the same. Anyway, additional photography.
They're kind of the same thing, but I understand what one word might imply that the other word doesn't necessarily.
Yeah. So additional photography. I thought that he was going to be shooting an ending, a proper closure, because his 2017 movie had an open-ended tease for whatever his sequel was going to be, right? Like it was going to tease to something that we're not going to see right now, theoretically, unless Warner Brothers invests more. But fans are bringing up, and they're right, why would Warner Media and HBO Max invest $70 million, if that's the right number, in a one and done? It feels like they're trying to invest in a property that they think can continue, and so maybe it will. So I think it's exciting that DC got themselves to a place where they can move forward, and it doesn't have to be all connected. Mm-hmm. Snyder can do stuff on HBO Max. Matt Reeves can do stuff in his own little universe, and I think that's really exciting, because what got them in trouble is when they tried to force everything to connect in a Marvel way. And they shouldn't do that. They should have James Gunn come and do a Suicide Squad movie that doesn't connect to anything else, or, have James Wan do Aquaman movies that don't have to connect.
What better way to differentiate themselves from Marvel than to do that? Like, I know DCEU isn't the term we're using anymore, but just like for that descriptor to reflect connectivity, just throw it all out the window.
Yeah.
Bring in filmmakers with real style and unique sensibilities and let them apply that to the characters we know and love. And, I'm just excited. I'm as excited as anyone to see, Black Adam and Shazam crossover or whatnot. But some of the most exciting things that are happening in the DC film franchise that are not happening in Marvel is how with every single film and now show that they add to the slate, we don't like the possibilities are freaking endless because they're exploring every single genre. They're exploring comedy. They're going super dark. We have such a variety of content over there that Marvel, and I think for the better in the MCU because they have a very strong connectivity going there, but they can't do that.
No, 100%. If you want another example of it, look at Joker. For all for people who don't love it, it made over $1 billion and contended for Oscars. Because it wasn't, saddled with, you got to set up 4 more movies coming out of your universe. And so I think that that's really a strong way to go. And honestly, I think the DC comics operate that way. You more often get these sort of broken standalone, arcs that don't have to really build into a bigger story. And you get really great writers like a Tom King or a Scott Snyder who have a good idea. They run through it for 10 to 12 issues and then they move on to something else. And I think it's fine for the movies to operate that way. I just think logistically from a contract perspective, it could be a nightmare because what does Ben Affleck sign up to do? Is he signing up for a cameo in the Flash movie and an HBO Max series and something else? Like, I think that gets to be hard to juggle, but they could do it if they want to.
I mean, it could be hard to juggle, but it could wind up working in their favor. If they were in a situation like, let's say, Joaquin Phoenix and Joker, it's much easier to get someone of Joaquin Phoenix's caliber by only requiring that he sign on for one movie.
Yep.
Then the pressure is on you, and this pressure could serve the overall movie well. Make sure he has a great creative experience, and then maybe he will genuinely want to come back for more.
Well, and the Todd Phillips thing is a perfect example in that he had a good idea for a Joker movie. That's it. One idea for a Joker movie. And they were like, okay, cool, do it. It didn't have to be like, hey, I have a 3-part thing that's going to connect to this. And no, just go do that. Let's see how it works out. And if you pour your heart into it and it works out really well, you reap the benefits of it.
I'm all for that approach. I want to close out on a very difficult question, but just for the sake of being able to, because everyone's stuck at home. We're all looking for good content.
Yeah.
What is the best thing that you've watched since we've all been in lockdown that everybody can, watch at a click of a button right now?
It's probably a cliched answer, but we did Schitt's Creek. And it was wonderful. Okay. It was just wonderful. It just made me feel so happy. And we literally finished it days ago, and I'm super depressed that it's over because it was wonderful. Have you watched it?
I haven't watched it, and I've been thinking of it. I mean, obviously after the Emmys, but also I just went over to my sister's house, and her husband, my brother-in-law, is doing the binge. He just started it, and I'm like, maybe I should.
So I love Eugene Levy and Catherine O'Hara. I think they're delightful. The first season is a little bit rocky as it kind of finds its way. Okay. But seasons 2 through 6 are truly wonderful. And I'm glad it got all the Emmy love that it did. And you can watch the whole thing. Well, so seasons 1 through 5 are on Netflix. The final season is on Hulu right now. It hasn't made it to Netflix yet. But it was phenomenal. It was phenomenal. It really is as good as everybody says it is.
I'm so pumped. I need something like that in my life after I finish all the stuff I have to watch for work.
Always, right?
I need just always. A couple more hours in the day. Just seriously, pack on 4 hours to every day, and then I'm pretty sure I could watch most of what I want to watch.
How many things do we have to watch that are for work? Like, I miss just watching stuff for fun.
I don't know rare. If you're experiencing this, but since all of this began, I feel like I've been covering more TV than ever. Right. And TV where it's being released all at once in the binge watch format. And I'm in a position where I'm having to binge watch an entire series in like mere days.
Right. I know.
There's been a lot of that.
I started Lovecraft Country, and I only did the first episode, and I really liked it. So I'm glad that there's more to get through. So I'm gonna shift to that next. And apparently, Away. We have to watch Away with Hilary Swank. That's the next thing we're gonna watch.
Oh, my parents are obsessed with that.
Yeah, everyone who tells me about it says it's phenomenal, and they say you cry during every episode.
Because in our, like CinemaBlend Collider bubble, I haven't really seen anybody writing or talking about that show, but they've been watching it, and I'm just trying to understand, is it like a mom and dad thing, or are people really into the show?
You know what crushes for us is Yellowstone. People love Yellowstone.
I've heard wonderful things about Yellowstone.
Yeah.
Sean, I can't thank you enough for hopping on my Saturday stream and chatting with me just about your career and also about the book. And for I saw that comment from Ed too, where he already pre-ordered the book. If anybody else out there wants to, the link is in the description section of this video where you can just click on that link. You can pre-order the book. And then we can talk about it more when the book actually comes out.
I know. I feel like, so I'm talking to publishers about trying to get an ebook version of it released earlier to capitalize on the buzz for that. And one thing that we're trying to get done as well too, and I keep putting it out into the ether, is Ray Porter, who's doing the voice of Darkseid for the movie. He does audiobooks also, and he wants to do the audiobook for this. So it's just legal stuff that we're trying to get through and contracts. But I think we're going to get an audiobook of the Release the Snyder Cut book narrated by Ray Porter. So
everyone out there knows this. I'm a diehard audiobook listener, so that would be amazing. But I will give you credit. Your book is the first book that I'm like actually reading in a very, very long time.
Thank you. I'll take it. I'll take it.
Guys, go follow Sean on Twitter. Check out his work on CinemaBlend and check out the Real Blend podcast. Wait, I have one more question for you because I know Kevin talks about his tattoos all the time. If you had to get a movie tattoo, what would it be?
God, that is a really hard one. I would probably get a Spider-Man head. Something Spider-Man really. Spider-Man is my favorite character of all time. He would be the only character that I would put on my body.
Okay.
So yeah, maybe the eyes, maybe the very distinct eyes with a red, maybe like a red circle around it. I'm very into minimalist tattoos that represent a fandom, and I feel like that's what I'm picturing as you describe it. Right? I have an awesome Spider-Man shirt that it's just like white lines. And when you don't really get what it is until you step back, and he's like in a crouch position sort of thing, but it's a black shirt and it's the white lines that sort of carve out it's very much that.
Okay.
That would kind of be pretty cool.
I'm very into this, but also, even though I'm a tattoo nut, I respect not really one.
I would do the Fantastic Four logo because that's a nickname for our family. Michelle and the two boys. We call it I refer to them as Fantastic Four all the time.
That makes me so happy. Did you do any of the coverage for the King of Staten Island?
Yeah, we had Judd Apatow on. He was on the Real Blend. Did
they reach out to you? I forget what the company is called now. It's a company that makes custom temporary tattoos.
Oh, that's cool. No, I didn't get that.
Mine is gone, but I feel like you should just have them draw your Spider-Man idea and just I don't know, put it on.
Not a bad idea.
Really cool. I just got silly with it and I drew Dewey's face. It looked like a shitty child's drawing of a cat. But
have you told your story about your Jurassic Park tattoo?
Yeah, most people I feel like know it at this point, mainly because of the Sam Jackson Sophia Boutella video. Yeah. That was like the one place where we actually had it all stitched together. But I'll never forget where that started.
Yeah.
Do you remember the Avengers Age of Ultron? I think it was Age of Ultron, or maybe it was Civil War. Shit, I'm mixing up all my years, but there was a red carpet, a red carpet at San Diego Comic-Con, and shit just got crazy at the end of it, where everyone was swarming them.
Okay.
And Sam Jackson was on that line, and for whatever reason, I was talking to someone about Jurassic Park and tattoos, and I'm like, you know what? If I ever meet Sam Jackson, I'm gonna ask him to give me write down something from Jurassic Park, and it would have to be Hold On to Your Butts. And that was where the idea was born.
Right.
And then I feel like it must have been Age of Ultron because I needed the gap between that and Kingsman, which is where I asked him. But that That was something else, and it's something I still love.
And now we know it's Bob Zemeckis who gave them
I
that
was
line.
so happy when you sent that to me. I feel like that just adds another layer to how much I love that like itty bitty but important part of Jurassic Park.
There you go.
All right, Sean, I will let you go. To everybody out there, again, check out all of Sean's information in the description section of this video. Everybody keep staying safe, having fun out there, and keep coming back to this channel for more movie coverage.